I'll stop talking and I'll let Anna start talking, and then at the end we can do a little Q&A, and if anyone would like to share their be bold moments, we would love to hear them, whether that's now or whether it's later on across the weekend. Like, come and talk to us and tell us about them, because we'd be so excited to hear what you've been up to this weekend.
Hello. Hi. Is this okay? Can everyone hear me? Amazing. I'm Anna, and for those of you who don't know me, I go by Anna Hazelnutt on all my socials, and I'm a rock climber. I've actually been traveling in the UK for the last 2 months, but I think it actually might be longer by now, just because I really love the climbing here so much. And I thought it would be really fun if we opened up with a few questions for everyone to participate with. So if you want, you can raise your hand and join me. And I am also a really talented artist, so as you will soon see. All right. The first question I have is, raise your hand if you have ever been the only woman in a climbing group, or just the odd one out. Like, you felt like you're the only person in the climbing group and you can't really relate. So if you've been the only woman, or for me sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, I'm like the only brown climber right now. So raise your hand if this has ever been you. And this is my drawing of, this is my fringe, which is what you call it. I call it bangs, but fringe. Okay, my next question is, raise your hand if you have ever gotten like unwanted attention or beta spraying while climbing. Yeah. Okay, and so for those of you, thank you for flipping these, my beautiful creations. So for those of you who don't know what beta spraying is, it's just when you get like an unwanted comment on how to climb the climb you're climbing and you don't really want it and it feels a bit condescending. It's like a negative thing usually. All right, raise your hand if you've ever like cut your time short on the wall or avoided a climb because you felt like other people were waiting for you or other people were going to try that climb. Yeah. Oh, people are raising their hands. Okay. Raise your hand if you've ever been embarrassed for being scared on the wall. Yeah. And of course, like, you can always apply this to like anything that's not climbing, like just if you've been embarrassed about your emotions. And then lastly, raise your hand if you have ever had to overcome body image issues or work with how you look because of climbing or anything else, just you've had to deal with that. Yeah, for me, it's been climbing, right? All right, and then lastly, raise your hand if you've raised your hand for any of these questions. And just look around. Okay. So when I was like writing what to say and thinking about what I wanted to share, for a second, I was writing these questions. I'm like, oh my gosh, what if no one raises their hands? And I'm just here like so awkward. Just like, oh my God, this whole time it's just been a me thing. And then I thought, well, at least, because I always like to look on the bright side of things, that like I'd get like a lot of shoulder gains from keeping my hand up for so long. I was like, yeah, okay, it'll be worth it. And then I thought about it, and I thought maybe the reason I wasn't sure if other women would relate to this is because I don't think we've done such a good job talking openly about this in the community. So I just think a festival like this, Women's Trad Fest, a place where we can all get together and be like, yeah, isn't that weird how, like, as women, our strength and capability isn't, like, valorized and it's not uplifted, and we kind of have to, like, work through, unwrite, and redefine what womanhood means as we enter the climbing scene? Or isn't it kind of weird that we, like, live in a society that, like, paints emotional vulnerability as a weakness, and as climbers we feel like we need to be fearless or stoic on the wall, and then on top of that, as a woman or as someone who doesn't feel like they fit into this community, you feel like you have to prove yourself on the wall to like fit in with this masculine climber archetype that we have. Okay, so now I want to go into a few stories to kind of unpack everything I've just asked and said. So once upon a time, I was trying this climb called Once Upon a Time. And for those of you who don't know what this is, it's like this beautiful 50-meter slab trad climb on the coast of Devon. Just gorgeous, humbling. And I guess I've decided, like, on the stage it'll be this flag right here. So it's just this humbling climb, right? And just the process of undertaking it as a project and then following it through to the inevitable send just like taught me a lot and helped me overcome a lot of the insecurities that I felt as a woman entering the trad scene. So
by humbling, do you just mean absolutely terrifying?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was just like I mean, if you look at it, I thought, oh, no way do people climb this. Like, there aren't even holds. They're all upside down. I'm just going to, like, pull up my speech to have it with me just in case, you know, I need it.
Always good to have a backup. It's actually really scary standing up in front of your lot.
Okay, all right. So as a solo female traveler, I find that I spend a lot of my time looking for climbing partners, and most of which are men. So if we go, I don't know if we have the pictures anymore, but like, it's okay. We're just going back to the first question. We're just gonna like kind of break it down and go through all the questions I just asked.
Failed at the first hurdle.
So my first question was if any of you have ever been the only woman in a climbing group. Because I think it's really important to note that this is an experience shared by like every woman I have ever climbed with, and it's pretty rare to see the opposite of this, you know, i.e. one man in a group of women. And I say this like not to put men down or, you know, it's not, it's just like, I think it's just important to like, I guess, bring attention to how weird and isolating it can feel to be a woman in the climbing scene. And like specifically to myself as a woman who travels to climb for my career, I probably spend like 90% of my time with men, which is just wild as a woman.
But I think that's something that so many people here can relate to because it is our norm at the moment.
Yeah.
Do you know, within our industry and within the climbing community, like that's just normal at the moment.
Yeah.
So the fact that we can come here to Women's Trad Fest and you guys are all here doing such an awesome job is amazing. Because that's going to flip the balance.
I was going to say, I say this, yet today I had a bouldering session with all girls and one guy, and it was fantastic. I was looking around like, oh, this is ace. This is amazing. Okay, so there I was, standing up at the humbling climb, feeling like a total imposter to be there because not only was I a beginner trad climber, but I also like started becoming acutely aware that not many women had climbed this grade, this level before. And this is kind of when I'll fangirl a bit because one day at the crag, like Angus, who's here somewhere, and Hazel Finley showed up, and I was like, oh my God, like, okay, Hazel's here, and I knew she was the first woman to have climbed the climb I was trying. And I remember like running back to the van that I was living in, and I had this stovetop oven, like the circular one. I don't know if any of you live in a van or know what I'm talking about, but it's kind of like tricky to get it right. And I totally burnt this cake, but it was the only thing I had as like an excuse to go talk to her. So I like cut a slice of cake and I go over and I say hi. And it's just like in that moment, it just felt so important to have her there and show up at the crag because it was like, wow, there's like this is a badass woman, and she's there in the flesh as a reminder of how women can be doing the things that I want to do. And so it made me like want to follow in her footsteps, and just having one example of a strong female climber suddenly felt so important. And it's like a bit cliche, but representation matters. And in the wise words of my favorite poet at the moment, Rupi Kaur, we all move forward when we realize how resilient and striking the women around us are. So the next question I asked was whether any of y'all have received unwanted attention or unsolicited beta spraying while climbing.
Advice that wasn't asked for, nor necessarily wanted or needed.
Yeah. So as I kept returning to the Sea Cliff project weekend after weekend, I noticed this thing start to happen where as passerbys were like walking down the cliff and then they wanted to talk to us climbers, they would start like directing their questions to my climbing partner, Tom, who is a man. So they start, you know, talking to him rather than me. And at first I totally was unfazed by this. And like I just kind of wanted to melt into the grass and away from responsibility because I already felt like it was so outrageous that I was there in the first place. But as I started growing more confident and as the project days ticked by, I was like, oh yeah, like I'm going to respond to some of these questions. I do belong here. Like I know what I'm talking about. And yet like you should see it. Like it was so clear that they would just, although I would respond to their questions, like a lot of people, almost everyone would just like keep asking them to my climbing partners or to the men around me and like totally like phase me out of the conversation. And so just last month, I actually asked Tom about this because we were back at the same cliff projecting the climb next door. And I was like, have you noticed that happening, or is it just in my head? And Tom was like, actually, yeah, no, I have noticed that, and it's pretty awful, isn't it? And so the next time we went back to the crag, there was this guy, you know, coming about to ask us climbers some questions, and then I slowly noticed myself getting like butted out of the conversation. I was like, okay, climb. And then Tom just says like, oh, I actually don't know, but she's the one that's climbed both of the climbs on this cliff, so you should really be asking her. And I remember just like stifling a laugh before like nodding in confirmation, like, oh yeah, okay. And I guess the moral of this is that we're all a team, and the more we talk about like the subtle and not so subtle ways that women are undermined, patronized, objectified, and dismissed in the climbing community, the more people start noticing and taking action, because it's an everybody problem. And after that moment, I felt even more confident that I belong there, because I was like reassured that this was a unfair social bias being projected onto the situation rather than a confirmation of my inadequacies. And feeling like you belong, it's such a game changer. Okay, so the next question was if you've ever cut your time on the wall short or even avoided a climb because you felt someone else was waiting for you. Okay, I want to do a quick sidebar here, because I know it's not just women who experience these topics. I'm just coming at these topics from a woman's perspective, and more specifically from a woman who grew up in Los Angeles, which is the showbiz capital of the world, and in a non-climbing scene, whose definition of femininity included, but was not limited to, femininity included was not limited to like thinness, people-pleasing, submissiveness, domesticity, just like a lot of negative emotions, really. And it's not to dismiss the detrimental impact that sexism has on men or on masculinity, but to address how recognizing sexism in the climbing world and doing something about it can make a huge difference for everybody's experience. It's been this multi-year project of mine to redefine what womanhood looks like for myself, and like specifically to this trad climb, to Once Upon a Time. As I became more and more obsessed with it, like this flame started crackling, and it just totally overtook any of those ingrained societal, like, ladylike niceties that I had. And what that means is I just really started putting myself first, which is something I feel like I hadn't really done before. And it all started with, on that climb, learning how to rope solo. So rope soloing is when you're like climbing a climb, but totally independent of anyone else. You just learn how to set up the top rope and set up your systems so you can just climb the climb.
So you don't even need someone to belay for you. You can literally go out by yourself.
Yeah. And so I like let myself have this totally guilt-free experience, right? Where I wasn't like a burden on any belayer. And it was so eye-opening, because I was like, oh my gosh, this mentality can just percolate through to all of my climbing sessions when someone is actually involved. And so I started feeling more empowered to like choose my own projects, rather than just go where other people wanted to go, because I felt like that was convenient. And when I was projecting, I felt like I could just try sections over again, because I knew not only would I return the favor for my climbing partner, but it's not hogging the wall, right? It's just a part of the process. And I find that a lot of my girlfriends really struggle to get enough time on the wall, or even shy away from climbs because they just like don't want to be in the way. And I just want to say that regardless of what you're climbing and regardless of how strong you are, you have just as much of a right to be on the wall as anyone else, and your needs are not a burden. So, working Once Upon a Time, that climb that I've decided is there, meant that I had to overcome a lot of fears. And the morning before I went for a lead attempt, I remember just like sitting on the toilet and having the worst diarrhea, right? I was just like, oh my God, what am I doing? And then it's just like, that's just how it is, isn't it? And I've spent so many days like crying on sport climbs because I thought, oh my gosh, that bolt is too far away, or on boulder down climbs because it was just a bit too high and like the down climb was uncertain. I've screamed bloody murder at a crag falling just like half a foot, I think, like just screaming. I'm like, oh wait, I'm not even falling. And I've like yelled, take, while like death gripping a quick draw, right? I think I've cried in front of every single one of my climbing partners, and I really do think that you can fact check that. And the thing is, I like still feel this way, like I still cry. I'm just getting a lot more familiar with my own personal fear responses, and I'm like slowly growing way more comfortable with that discomfort. A lot of people are quite shocked about my mental progression in climbing because I'm like so openly talking about my fear of falling, yet I'm also slowly becoming known for like really bold and difficult trad ascents. And as far as I can tell, the difference between the me that's crying on a safely bolted sport climb and the me who's undertaking these bold trad ascents is that I'm just not as embarrassed about my process. Because the truth is, I'm still very much both of those people, but the way I'm handling my emotions these days is quite different. I've realized that my visceral reactions to fear involve a lot of tears and a lot of emotionality. That is just how it is. And those specific reactions are the feminine stereotype of being unable to like cope with a difficult situation or unable to cope with fear. So it made me really embarrassed because I felt like, oh gosh, why can't I just get it together? You know, like why can't I get it together like the men do? Why do I have to cry? Like why is that the thing I have to do? You know, I was just so embarrassed I would get stuck in this cyclical self-pity loop of inaction and come down and be like, oh my gosh, I feel like a loser. I feel like I failed. I feel like I don't fit in. And then it was in Chulia, right? And I saw this grown-ass man throw a tantrum on the wall, right? So he's on the wall. He's pretty close to us where I'm projecting. And he does I'm sure you've all seen this. He's like, I have to take the fall, you know, down. He's like, I'm going to take the fall. And he takes the fall, screams, and like takes his shoe off and just like throws it at the wall. And his like climbing partner's trying to lower him with as much grace as you can do in that situation, right? And I just like had this epiphany. I was like, oh my God. Like, he is crying right now. And I like looked at my friend. I was like, that's his cry. He's crying. It was just like mind blowing because like, why did I find that reaction, those expressions of fear and terror totally socially acceptable? Yet when I'm like, oh, like crying a little bit on the wall, like I find that a weakness. Like, is that society's like, I guess, definition of womanhood and what a feminine emotion is? It's crying. So by working on my own biases and rewriting how one is supposed to show fear, I can actually just focus on my personal process. And I cry, and that's totally okay. And it's been a wonderful journey, an ongoing journey, to self-discovery, acceptance, and to hard trad climbing. Okay, my last question was if any of you have had to work through body image issues or overcome, just issues based on how you look. And specifically for me, it's been through climbing. Because it's often the elephant in the room, but it's hard to talk about how the addition of muscle, the broadening of shoulders, like my mangled feet, like no one wants to see my feet, the calluses on my hand, thick fingers, just general bruises, cuts, they push us further away from this like untouched, delicate, pure feminine ideal that the media shoves down our throats. And it's not easy knowing that there's like this active external push against women as they become more capable, strong, and proficient rock climbers. And I don't have the perfect answer to this, aside from the obvious statement that there's something majorly wrong with society's depiction of being a woman. And that's up to people like us to be bold and combat it, to fight back with representation and conversation asserting that the ability to pursue what you love, whether that be rock climbing or any other passion or hobby, is beautiful, regardless of gender. So with that, I would love to hear your stories about how you've dealt with any of these issues, or if there were any poignant topics that I've missed, I would love to hear that, and I'll be here answering questions. So thank you so much for sharing your time with me today.
So we've got about 5 minutes. If anyone would like to, this is a like huge group of people, ask Anna or Danny any questions about what they've been talking about, or if anyone wants to share any sort of be bold moments. But thank you so much for that very inspirational talk. So that was really great. Has anyone got any burning questions that they would like to be bold and ask Anna? Yay!
Okay. So yeah, I've climbed and cried several times to the point where I can't see where I'm putting my hands because of my own tears. And I always climb with my partner, who's a man. So that's kind of my only experience of climbing is with a man. And I think he's just doesn't understand. He's just like, I just don't get it, because he just, he doesn't cry when he gets scared. He whistles bizarrely. But I just wondered, he doesn't have a tantrum, he just whistles. But do you have a way of kind of, what do you say to guys to kind of help them understand that, okay, it's okay that I'm crying, and just, kind of make it okay? Do you know what I mean?
I just had a conversation with my friend about this, who is a guy, and he was like, sometimes the things it takes, maybe because of society, because of whatever, what it takes for a man to cry is quite intense. Like, someone asked him, when was the last time he cried? And he's like, oh, this funeral, right? It's just well, that's pretty major. And when's the last time we cried? I'm like, yesterday when I was washing my hands because the soap said goodbye. And so, I think what's lacking here is, this understanding that it's, when we're crying, it's not like we're at a funeral. That's not the level of emotion we're feeling. This is just a way to express our emotions. And so to have that conversation with hey, this is like me just being scared, and it's not as intense maybe as you think. It's just how I express this, and it's, this is my process. And I think just having a conversation about it is really helpful, because then they don't think, oh my gosh, it's literally the end of the world because she's crying, because that's when I would cry, but it's just different. Maybe that'll help.
Putting it into their perspective as well. Like Anna said, some guys are going to take their shoe off and are going to throw it at the wall. And sometimes it's just saying, this is just me taking my shoe off and throwing it at the wall. That's all it is. It's the same. It's just a different expression of the same thing. Just looks a little bit different. That's all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there anyone? We've got time for one more question before we move over to DMM. Do you want to ask a question?
So climbing with a group of guys, seems like a pressure in terms of you really should be trying this harder thing, because otherwise you're not going to get better. And that's true in some cases, but then sometimes it's difficult to defend yourself. I just want a nice chill day today. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I feel like we've all been there where it's no, actually, I'm quite happy with this. I mean, it's hard. I feel like being really secure in the fact that that's what's going to make you the happiest, and then being look, my goal today isn't to do that. My goal is to have a good experience on the wall, and that's gonna give me the most happiness for the day. And just, maybe reframe it in a way that's I'm not always trying to do the thing that pushes me the most. Some days I just want to have fun. And I think that's a good maybe way to reframe it.
Thank you so much. I think so. Anna and Daniela and the team at RAB are going to be here for the rest of the weekend. So if anyone wants to carry on having really cool discussions with the team here about their Be Bold moments, then I'm sure Anna's going to be... by the way, I'm going to just do a thing now. I saw Anna sneaking off with a bouldering mat earlier.
Don't tell them.
Women's Trad Festival.
I do trad climb.
Yeah. So trad, whatever.
And then I get up here
Be bold. Yeah.
This was just my goal.
Everyone. Yeah.
My goal for the day was just to be happy, and that's okay. And that's just...
So on that note, we're going to round up, but please give Anna and Daniela a huge round of applause. Thank you so much.